June 9th, 2025, dawned with a gentle promise in Harmony Creek. The sun rose over the rooftops, casting golden light across the quiet streets. Laughter echoed as children chased each other down sidewalks, their voices mingling with the distant hum of lawnmowers and the chirping of birds. It was the kind of morning that made you believe nothing bad could ever happen here, a place where time seemed to slow and every moment felt safe, familiar and bright. The air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass carried on a soft summer breeze. Neighbors waved from porches and the world felt alive, vibrant and full of possibility. Inside the Miller home, the family slipped into their daily rhythms. Tom tinkered with tools in the garage, the metallic clinks blending with the morning sounds. Sarah moved through the kitchen, sunlight streaming through the window as she prepared breakfast, humming a tune. Lily knelt in the garden, her hands deep in the soil, tending to her sunflowers with care and pride. Upstairs, Jake was lost in his own world, fingers flying over the controller as he played his favorite game, oblivious to the world outside. The house was filled with the comforting sounds of family life, laughter, conversation, the sizzle of eggs on the stove. Beyond their home, Harmony Creek buzzed with the energy of a typical summer day. Neighbors gathered on sidewalks, sharing stories and coffee. Children raced their bikes down the street, their shouts of joy echoing between houses. In the fields, farmers worked beneath a flawless blue sky, confident that the day would unfold just like any other. But as the afternoon crept in, a subtle shift began. The sky, once a brilliant blue, faded to a strange, sickly green-yellow. The air grew thick and heavy, pressing down on the town like a warning. The birds that had filled the morning with song vanished, and the breeze that had danced through the trees stilled, leaving an unnatural silence in its wake. People paused, glancing up at the sky with furrowed brows, sensing something was off. Playgrounds emptied as parents called their children inside, and a quiet unease began to settle over Harmony Creek. Faces that had smiled just hours before now showed flickers of concern, as if everyone felt a storm brewing just out of sight. Still, most brushed off the warning signs. The routines of daily life were a comfort, a shield against the unknown. Sarah continued her chores, ignoring the weather alerts on the radio. Tom stayed in the garage, determined to finish his project. The family clung to the familiar, unwilling to let fear disrupt their day. Around town, people laughed off the strange sky, convincing themselves it was just a passing summer storm. Friends gathered on porches, sharing jokes and stories, unaware of the danger creeping closer. No one wanted to believe that their peaceful day could be shattered in an instant. But beneath the surface, the calm was deceptive. A fragile peace holding its breath before the storm unleashed its fury. The first warning came from the television, a tornado watch for the county. The Miller family sat frozen, the familiar living room suddenly feeling foreign and unsafe. The words scrolling across the bottom of the screen seemed almost surreal, as if they belonged to another place, another life. But the urgency in the meteorologist's voice left no room for doubt. Outside, the wind rattled the windows, a subtle reminder that nature was about to unleash its fury. The word tornado instantly changed the mood in every home and business. Conversation stopped mid-sentence, laughter faded, and a heavy silence settled over Harmony Creek. In offices, workers abandoned their tasks, eyes glued to screens and radios. In coffee shops and grocery stores, strangers exchanged anxious glances, united by a shared sense of dread. The community, so often bustling with the routines of daily life, now held its breath. Moments later, the town's emergency sirens wailed, signaling imminent danger. The shrill, piercing sound cut through the stillness, echoing off buildings and down empty streets. It was a sound everyone knew but hoped never to hear, a sound that meant there was no more time to wait or wonder. Panic swept through Harmony Creek. People poured out of shops and offices, some clutching phones, others calling out for loved ones. The air was thick with fear and urgency, as if the entire town had been jolted awake from a dream. Parents rushed to schools, desperate to gather their children before the storm hit. Shopkeepers locked up, pulling down metal shutters with trembling hands. Neighbors shouted urgent warnings across fences and driveways, their voices barely rising above the growing wind. In these frantic moments, the community's bonds were tested and strengthened. The Miller family snapped into action. Tom dropped his tools in the garage, heart pounding as he raced inside. Sarah turned off the radio, her face pale but determined, while the kids abandoned their games and gathered in the hallway. Each movement was automatic, practiced from years of tornado drills, but this time it felt terrifyingly real. The sky outside darkened to a bruised purple, casting an eerie glow over the neighborhood. Trees bent in the strengthening wind, their branches thrashing like desperate arms. The air was charged, electric, as if the world itself was holding its breath before the storm's arrival. The siren's relentless cry was a call to survival, a signal that every second now mattered. People looked up at the swirling clouds, searching for signs of the approaching tornado, their faces etched with fear and determination. Tom shouted, "Sarah! Kids! Now!" As the family gathered together, hearts racing. They moved quickly, grabbing flashlights, blankets, and the emergency kit they hoped they'd never need. The walls of their home, once a place of comfort, now felt fragile against the power of the storm. The world outside was transforming into chaos. Debris whipped through the air, trash cans tumbled down the street, and the wind howled with a voice that seemed almost alive. The familiar landscape of Harmony Creek was vanishing beneath the storm's fury. The distant rumble of thunder grew into a deep, ominous growl, shaking the ground and rattling windows. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the swirling clouds for brief, terrifying moments. Each flash revealed the storm's growing power. The time for routine was over. The monster was coming, and all that mattered now was survival. As the Miller family hurried to their basement, the wind outside rose to a scream, and the whispers of the storm became a roar that would haunt Harmony Creek forever. The Millers moved with urgent precision. Tom took charge, assigning tasks. Jake grabbed the emergency kit, Lily found the cat, Sarah gathered blankets. The emergency kit, packed years ago, was finally needed. The storm cellar in the backyard was their only hope. Tom wrenched open the heavy doors as the wind roared and trees bent outside. One by one, they scrambled into the cellar, Jake with the kit, Lily with the cat, Sarah with supplies. Tom bolted the doors, sealing them in darkness. Above, the storm's fury intensified. Huddled together, they listened as their world was torn apart. They had made it now. All they could do was wait. The tornado struck with unimaginable force. The roar above was deafening, a freight train of wind, debris, and destruction. The ground shook, the cellar walls vibrated, and the air pressure dropped. Above, houses exploded, trees snapped, cars tumbled, and the town square was obliterated. The historic clock tower collapsed, a symbol of Harmony Creek's loss. Inside the cellar, the Millers could only listen, ears popping, hearts pounding as their home was destroyed. The storm was a blind, merciless force, erasing decades in minutes. There was no speaking, only the overwhelming sound and fear. The monster raged just feet above their heads. In the darkness, the Millers clung to each other, fear and love binding them together. Tom shielded his family, Sarah whispered shaky reassurances, and the children held tight. Every crash above sent new waves of panic. The ancient oak tree smashed into their house, dust raining down. Tom checked the ceiling. Miraculously, the cellar held. In the chaos, they sang a silly family song, voices trembling but defiant. Their love became a shield stronger than concrete. Suddenly, the roar faded, replaced by rain and distant sirens. Silence settled, fragile and uncertain. They had survived, but what was left above? When the storm finally passed, Tom and Jake pressed their shoulders against the heavy cellar doors, forcing them open with trembling hands. The world outside was unrecognizable. They stepped out, blinking in the grey morning light, into a landscape that had been utterly transformed by the tornado's fury. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and splintered wood, and a strange, almost eerie quiet had settled over everything. Where their home once stood, there was now only a chaotic tangle of broken boards, shattered glass, and the massive oak tree that had been ripped from the ground and hurled across the yard. The familiar comforts of their lives, family photos, treasured keepsakes, the kitchen table where they'd shared meals, were buried somewhere beneath the wreckage. All around them, the neighborhood was flattened. Houses that had stood for generations were now reduced to piles of debris, their roofs torn away, their walls collapsed. Streets that once echoed with laughter and the sounds of daily life were now choked with twisted metal, broken furniture, and the remnants of shattered dreams. A heavy, almost suffocating silence hung over the ruins, broken only by the soft patter of rain and the distant wail of sirens. The world felt paused, as if holding its breath in the aftermath of the storm's rage. Every step crunched on broken glass and splintered wood, echoing in the emptiness. Sarah stood amidst the debris, tears streaming down her face as she took in the devastation. But then, slowly, the silence began to break. One by one, neighbors emerged from their shelters, blinking in disbelief, clutching each other for comfort and support. At first, there was only stunned silence, but soon voices began to call out. Hesitant at first, then louder. "Are you okay? Is anyone hurt? The questions echoed through the ruins, a lifeline thrown from one survivor to another. People moved from house to house, checking on friends and strangers alike. In those first moments, concern for others outweighed the shock of their own loss. Hugs were exchanged, hands were held, and tears were shared as the reality of what had happened began to sink in. Amid the wreckage, the spirit of Harmony Creek began to shine through. Neighbors who had once only exchanged polite greetings now worked side by side, clearing debris, offering words of comfort, and sharing what little they had left. Tom found an elderly neighbor trapped beneath a fallen beam and helped her to safety. Sarah, despite her own shock, tended to the wounded with gentle hands. Jake and Lily searched the debris for lost pets, calling out names and listening for hopeful barks or meows. In the face of overwhelming destruction, the people of Harmony Creek came together. They formed small groups, sharing food, water, and stories of survival. Each act of kindness, no matter how small, became a beacon of hope in the darkness. They were no longer just neighbors, they were survivors, bound together by the ordeal they had faced. The bonds forged in those first hours would last a lifetime. United by loss, but also by hope, they faced the darkness together, ready to rebuild and to find light in each other. In the weeks after the tornado, Harmony Creek's true strength emerged. Volunteers and emergency crews arrived, but the residents led the rebuilding. The town square became a hub for supplies and support. The Millers, like everyone, found purpose in helping others. Tom rebuilt, Sarah organized aid, Jake and Lily supported volunteers. They learned home was more than walls, it was people and community. Slowly, new houses rose, saplings were planted, and laughter returned. Stories of survival and kindness spread, healing old wounds. The tornado left scars, but also a legacy of hope and unity. Harmony Creek would be rebuilt, stronger together on the foundation of neighbors helping neighbors.